The use of drones is just one way the U.S. military has approached unmanned combat, but the Pentagon is also exploring another way. For more, CCTV's Jim Spellman joins us from the newsroom with more. Jim.
Elaine, they look like something from a science fiction movie, but they are very real, and some fear these robots could become the drones of the future.
He looks like a soldier, moves like a soldier, and marches like a soldier. But underneath that camouflage uniform, Petman is something very different. Petman is a robot designed to test uniforms built by an American company called Boston Dynamics with funds from the U.S. Department of Defense. In the near future, robots like Petman and other less human-looking machines could be used to keep first responders out of harm's way during disasters like wildfires or the Fukushima nuclear disaster. But experts say it is inevitable that machines like these will one day be used in battle.
It'll be a substitute for what in the past would have been a human being in a cockpit or a human being in a tank or a foot soldier.
For now, most of these robots are controlled by operators, but research is focusing on creating fully autonomous robots who will make their own decisions when performing their missions. Enter Atlas. Standing nearly 2 meters high and weighing 150 kilograms, Atlas is being provided to 8 universities and research labs for further development, including greater levels of autonomy. There's no indication that any of these robots are meant for the battlefield, but fears that fully autonomous robots could be the next major evolution in weaponry concerns groups like the Campaign to Stop Killer Robots and the United Nations, which released a report last year calling for a moratorium on lethal autonomous robots until a legal framework for their use can be established.
We're headed in that direction to where machines are going to be autonomous and can make their own decisions, but who is going to be accountable?
Like the drones currently in use, robots have the potential to greatly reduce the loss of life for the country that has robot superiority, something that may make conflicts easy to start and hard to finish.
Americans aren't coming home in body bags because of drones, and it makes it palatable to the public.
Someone's coming home in a body bag.
But not us.
Ultimately, what is at risk may be our humanity, as the line between weapon and warrior continues to blur.
So how far off is it until we may see fully autonomous robots? The U.S. Department of Defense won't say how far along they are, but defense systems with varying degrees of autonomy are already in place in Israel and the demilitarized zone between the Koreas and on some U.S. naval vessels. And right now, the U.K. is testing a semi-autonomous stealth drone called Tyrannus, which can find and choose its own targets. At the moment, it is said to need an operator to make the final decision to engage a target. So still a few steps away from full autonomy, Elaine.
All right, CCTV's Jim Spellman in our Washington newsroom. Thanks. For more on the use of robots in the military, we have two people joining us with differing opinions. With us live from New York City is Mike Lyons, a senior fellow with the Truman National Security Project, and from Beijing, Professor Noel Sharkey, an expert on robotics. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being there. Noel, let's start with you in Beijing. There are more drones in the world than ever before, and we just saw that story about these military-type robots, these autonomous robots, and it appears we're beyond drones now.
Well, we're moving beyond drones. Yes, there is massive proliferation throughout the world. It's really big business. There's a lot of billions of bucks to be earned, and so companies are working very fast. And there's a sort of arms race developing between different nation states. I've tracked 77 countries now that have drones or are developing them themselves. But now we're going to move beyond these because it's new bells and whistles to sell more. And we're moving to the stage of autonomous drones like the X-47B and the Mantis you've mentioned in your footage. And this is very, very concerning. It will change the nature of warfare, I believe. And the X-47B is being specifically designed for use in the Pacific. It's got a 2,000-mile range, and so because the Chinese now have got weapons that can sink American aircraft carriers for the first time, so they need to keep further away in the 2,000-mile range, and it can automatically refuel in the air. It's a pretty scary time.
It looked pretty scary, some of the video we saw. Mike, I'd like to bring you in on this and your take. As the story mentioned, it's more palatable to see these drones take place in countries where we don't want to see humans being killed, but we still do see humans being killed.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is collateral damage is part of the process. But the American president would say that drone use right now is legal. It's highly effective. And it also saves lives. And as the United States prepares to kind of chase down terrorists in these places that have hid away in countries that can no longer catch them, they've used this technology. There's no question that the drone, the aerial unmanned vehicle, armed with a rocket, has changed warfare. It's one of those things like the crossbow before, the machine gun, and the airplane has changed the way nations will eventually fight their wars.
Well, let's talk about that because, you know, seeing this video of these drones and these robots, it looks like something out of a movie. Do you think we'll see a day where we see drones and robots fighting one another from various countries?
I think that's very far in the future, if that at all. I mean, you still have the human element that exists. I think that there'll be treaties that could exist between countries there because, to the point, there could be some kind of proliferation and an arms race to do this. You've got to get other countries involved, I think, first and foremost. But to get to that level, I think, is pretty extreme, and I think we're very far away from that spot.
Noel, let's bring you back in from Beijing. What is your biggest concern about the use of drones and robots?
Well, at present, it's the autonomous ones that I don't like. That's weapons that once launched can engage targets, select and engage targets without further human supervision. But your other speaker said that President Obama says it's quite legal, the use of drones. And of course, that's very questionable because they're attacking in countries that the United States is not at war with. And recently, even in Libya, it seems that the War Powers Resolution in the United States is not being used in force. And it might be that this is not a war and this is human rights issues. And so you can't have collateral damage of humans if that's the case. And so innocent people are being murdered, essentially. But setting that aside for a moment, the use of autonomous drones, I think, will develop very, very quickly. I don't think it will be a long time. I could make you a killer autonomous robot within 2 weeks if I wanted to, if I wasn't concerned about the morality of it. The United States is concerned not to kill a lot of civilians, of course. But the problem with these weapons is that they can't, computer systems cannot discriminate their targets. They can't tell the difference between a combatant and a civilian. And I think by 2020, at the very latest, these systems will be deployed. They don't know how to be proportionate, how to apply proportionate force. And as you mentioned earlier, there's a bloodless war here on one side. And that side will be the high-tech countries, but not for terribly long because many countries will have them. As soon as these are developed, they're very hard to think of the ideas, they're very hard to develop them, but once they've been developed, they're not so difficult to copy. I know that China are developing the Anjun, the hidden sword. I can't speak Chinese, unfortunately, and that's an air-to-air combat, fully autonomous aircraft. I don't know how far they're getting along with it. The Russians are developing the Scat. The Israelis have a ground robot called the Guardian.
No, let me get Mike to weigh in on this as well, because let me get Mike to weigh in on this as well, because in the end, regardless of an autonomous robot, humans still have to be behind it. Humans still have to be behind the programming and the technology. Wouldn't you say, Mike? Let me get your thoughts.
Yeah, that's right. There are very few fire and forget weapons in the current inventory right now. And in fact, most of them are really the surface-to-air missiles, which are technology back from the 1950s and 60s that are heat-seeking in regard, and they're, again, indiscriminate to who they hit. It's point and click. But most weapon platforms have human involvement all the way, and in particular, the drone program that the United States has, they're clear with regard to eyes on those targets, and they're going through painstaking processes to make sure that the target is going to have the least amount of collateral damage as possible.
Noel, we have 10 seconds left. I'd like you to have the last word.
Well, I wish that what Mike was saying was absolutely true, and I fear it isn't. I think we need a new national treaty to prohibit these dangerous weapons before they get out of hand.
All right, Noel Sharkey from Beijing, Mike Lyons from New York City. Thank you both, gentlemen, for being with us this evening.